Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
I would say that the majority of people that we have on the podcast, when they buy a property, they're thinking really long term. They're buying a property and they either plan to hold it forever, or maybe if it appreciates enough, maybe they'll sell it and use that money to trade up to a better property. But Jacki, I wanted to bring you on the show today because you've got a very different strategy with your rentals. Tell me what you're doing.
Well, for our short-term rentals, basically what we do is we go into marketplaces that we want to experience and we'll use it for ourselves, but we buy the house, we fix it up, we get it all set up. We use the short-term rental strategy to make some money while we're also enjoying the house. And then in a couple of years, we'll sell it and realize the equity and move to the next place.
In other words, Jacki is finding what's almost a second home, a vacation property that she's going to use a lot. And then she puts it on Airbnb to cover all the expenses when she's not using it. After a couple of years, she'll want to go on vacation somewhere else. She'll sell that property, make a nice profit, and then use that money to buy the next property. So on the show today, we're going to figure out what she's doing, learn more about this strategy, and we'll take a look at one of her deals and figure out how much money she's making. Joining us on the show today from Flagstaff, Arizona is Jacki Tate. We'll take a quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Jacki. It's a lot of work to find a really good rental property. And when you actually find that property, you want to make sure you're working with a lender that can get that loan closed. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more or you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056.
Rental Income Podcast.
So how many times have you done this where you buy a property, rent it out for a while, and then sell it?
We have been doing this, I want to say we've been married for 11 years, so we've been doing this together for 11 years. This is something that my husband was doing even before I met him. So since we've been married, I want to say maybe half a dozen times.
Okay, awesome. And what are you buying? What's like a perfect property for you?
Good question. So the perfect property is going to be a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, or 2 or 3 bath. But we really don't ascribe to the strategy of having, more beds, more heads. We try to go more for that experiential instead of just simply beds and heads.
And so it's always vacation rentals, Airbnb type properties. You're not doing this with regular long-term rentals?
Oh no, long-term rentals is a completely different strategy. We do own long-term rentals, but that's a different ballgame.
So tell me about what your thinking is with selling a property, because I like the idea of coming into a big chunk of money, but I also like the idea of letting the property appreciate, and over 10 or maybe 20 years, it's really incredible how much wealth you can build. So why do you want to sell the properties after a couple of years?
Usually it's because what we're doing with these particular short-term rentals is that these are places that we're buying as a vacation home. And then we use the short-term rental income to ideally at bare minimum to offset the cost. So we're basically at a net zero, or to earn some income. And it's not going to be as much income as what you would earn if you just had it as a short-term rental for the entire time. But if we can make a little bit of money, and then when we end up selling in a couple of years, it's because we want to go experience a different marketplace. The other reason too is because you've got to just watch the market. We have no problem if we had a property that, if we were done with it, but we didn't realize the equity lift that we thought we were going to have, we would then either just have it as a short-term rental full-time if it was making money that way, or we could flip it into a midterm or long-term rental, depending. So,
Yeah.
there's always that option as a strategy, but for the most part, it's just we want to move on and experience somewhere different.
That makes sense. I mean, because going on vacation to the same place year after year can get kind of old. But if you're mixing it up in different locations every couple of years, it kind of keeps things interesting.
Well, it does. And unlike if you just went on vacation and rented a place for a month, rented somebody else's vacation rental, went on a cruise, whatever the case may be, you have no you have no potential upside. That's just
Mhm.
money that's gone and there's nothing you can do about it. And there's nothing wrong with that. We do those types of travels from time to time. But what we love about having a vacation home in a specific marketplace is that you're taking your vacation, but you're also immersing yourself in that community. You become a part of that community and you get to know people. And we're all about relationships. And, like I said, we're about the experience. So it's neat to be able to really immerse yourself into another community, understand it, learn it,
Mhm.
meet good people.
Right.
So
And then
that's the reason we do that.
you get a free place to live, and then at the end of it all, you're cashing out with a nice payday. So yeah, that does make sense. Now, what about tax wise? Are you doing a 1031 exchange when you sell the property to avoid paying taxes right then?
No. And there's several reasons why we don't use the 1031. The primary reason that we don't use it is we don't want to be locked into having to buy up. We want to be able to maybe start over again at the same price point. If we do buy up, then that's, maybe a different story. But for the most part, we don't do that. And so if you're doing a 1031, you're locked into having to spend all of that money,
Mhm.
at a higher price point or buy several properties. The other reason that we don't is that there's some restrictions around 1031 in terms of how often you can use that property. And so we don't want to get involved
Okay.
with that because we personally use the property.
And I got to imagine, I mean, tax wise, I think you're still coming out okay because you're keeping it for more than a year. So you get those long term capital gains rates, which are lower than
Yep.
a short term rate would be. So you're
Well, that's
still,
exactly right.
yeah,
And the other thing, and I will preface this by saying I am not a CPA. Please check with
sure.
your
Yeah.
accountant. But every time you go to the property, you're doing some type of work and some type of maintenance, even though you're there to enjoy it as a vacation rental, it still works. So then a lot of the things that you do when you are there, you can also write off on your taxes. So again, check with your CPA.
Yeah. So tell me about the rehab kind of work you do. Like what kind of projects are you doing to the properties?
It really depends. For the most part, we don't buy properties that need a whole overhaul. That's not really our strategy. For the most part, what we do is we buy something that is move-in ready as it is, and then we can just enhance and increase the value there. Maybe cosmetically, it's painting. Maybe it's fixing up the yard and the area to make it more of a retreat and less of just, bare bones yard, whatever the case may be. But for the most part, we're not doing major, overhauls in terms of fixing it up.
Are the properties generally ready to rent on day one, or do you have to do some work initially to get it up to speed?
You have to do some work initially to get it up to speed unless you purchase the property and it was already a functioning vacation rental. So, in one case, recently, we did buy one that was an active vacation rental. And so, when we purchased it turnkey. But we came in, we did have it painted, the interior, exterior painted. And then we went through the furniture. We got rid of, some of it was getting a little long in the tooth, some of it was a little beat up. And so we replaced some of that furnishing. We put in, more of our kitchenware. I find that's a really big deal in your vacation rentals. So we took their cheap kitchenware, we upgraded all of that so that somebody could truly be there and cook a good meal and have a good experience. Um, so, we did little things like that. And I mean, I think it took 2 weeks before we were back up on the market.
Well, let's dive into exactly how this works on one of your properties. Can we talk about maybe an example of a property? Can you tell me maybe how you found the property?
Sure. So it's a little funny. What we did, we ended up in Rockport, Texas, which is about 30 minutes north of Corpus Christi. And the way that we decided to be there, I wanted to own a beach house. This was during COVID, so you couldn't go out of the country. We had been looking at a town just over the border in Mexico that was a little off the books. And there was a report that, will show you the top 100 cities that are friendly to short-term rentals and where you can, do the best from a monetary perspective. And 9 out of 100 were located in Texas, and 3 of them were in this Corpus Christi area. So we said, okay, we got to go check this out. So we were in town. We visited a few different areas. We stayed for a week in one, a week in another, and did some exploration. And that's how we settled on Rockport, Texas. So we knew what we wanted. We knew what price point we wanted to be on. And it was literally the day we were leaving town that the house we ended up buying came on the market. So we called our realtor, met her over there. We literally stood in the driveway, wrote out a check for the earnest deposit. we
Wow.
were we were in it. We ended up getting into a bidding war on it, won the bidding war. Um, so we purchased that one for 305, and we purchased it with all the furniture completely turnkey. It wasn't a vacation rental when we bought it, but it was a second home. So the people were very willing to let everything stay.
All right, so there weren't I guess, like, were there any improvements you had to make up front on that property? It sounds like it was rent ready.
It was adorable. It was almost rent ready. So what we did is we took this was actually the one where we had 2 beds in one room. So there were 3 bedrooms, one of which was really large. So we put 2 queen beds in that room. It already had a king size bed in the primary, so we left that alone. And then in the 3rd bedroom, it had a queen in there. We actually took that out, used it as one of them in that 2nd bedroom. And then this is the one we turned into an office/TV room, and we put a pull-out sofa there. So we upgraded the TVs. We, did a little bit with the furnishings, but that was really all that was needed from the inside perspective. And then we put an automated gate on, so in order to park in the backyard behind the fence where the parking was, they had a gate and you had to get out and you had to open it. So we put a solar powered automated gate there. It had a very large yard with a lot of grass. And so we had a sprinkler system installed, which was probably the most expensive improvement that we made on that one. And then also we took one of their garden sheds and we turned that into a home office space as well.
Was that all stuff you did at the beginning, or was that over time while you owned the property?
We did it over time while we owned the property. I mean, we were able to just do rearrange some furniture, get some new bedding, and some different curtains, and then we were off to the races in terms of being able to rent it. The rest of it we just did over time.
All right, so you bought the property for 305. How much do you estimate you spent on upgrades while you owned the property?
We spent about $23,000 in total.
Okay, so you're all in at 328. And then what did you sell the property for?
We sold it for $425.
Wow, that's a really good return. And how long did you own it for?
A year and 3 months.
Wow, that's really good. What time frame was that in?
So we purchased it. We made the offer in October of 2020. We closed on it December 23rd, 2020. And so we spent Christmas and New Year's in our new town, in our new house, and that was hilarious because it's a small town and we didn't know that everything shut down
Hmm.
during those couple of weeks. So that was kind of fun. Um, and then we sold it. We put it on the market March or April of 2022.
Wow. So, I mean, you had really good timing, and that was just a great time to own real estate, but you've done this over a number of years. So, even in a more normal market, are you still making a good profit when you sell the properties?
For the most part, yes. And a lot of that has to do with, either doing the improvement. Some of it is just simple market lift. Some of it has to do with what we've done to the property. And like I said, if we have a property where maybe the market lift isn't enough but we're done using it as a vacation rental, we can turn it into a midterm with, for traveling
Hmm.
nurses or what
Sure.
have you, if that's an option, or just put it into a long-term rental,
Yeah.
and that'll be just fine.
Now, there's three things that I'm wondering about. So, the first one is on the Gulf Shore of Texas. I know that area has been hit with a lot of hurricanes. Is
Yes.
insurance just crazy expensive?
Yes, it really was. And so, I mean, and we did go into it with eyes wide open. We knew what the insurance costs were going to be, but they're pretty exorbitant. And I would imagine even more so now, because I know we've seen a definite trend in insurance just within the last year of the premiums really going up.
Yeah.
So,
So you just had to factor that into your numbers
correct.
yeah. Okay. The other thing is in Texas, they're known for having really high property taxes. Was did that make properties difficult to pencil out?
Um, yes and no. Obviously, we knew that going in. Unfortunately, in Texas, that's often offset by the fact that if you live in Texas, there's no state income tax.
Right.
We, as second homeowners who are primarily in Arizona, we didn't have that luxury. So we didn't get that upside. But yes, we factored it in, and it's just something that you have to take a look at. You have to know if you're going into a marketplace, and especially in a state that is not where you live, you just have to do your homework, do your research, and make sure you're working with a realtor who knows what you need to know
Mhm.
as a vacation home owner and a short-term rental owner.
All right. And then the third thing is management. So you live in Arizona, the
Mhm.
property's in Texas. That's a pretty big distance. Were you managing it yourself or did you have a local manager?
Yeah, absolutely hired a local manager. One of the things with this particular strategy is that we are not looking to create we're not looking to create a new business for
Right.
ourselves. We have enough of those. So we are just looking for, like I said, a home that we can enjoy and make money in the process. And so for that, we are 100% all about hiring somebody else to do the day-to-day work of getting it booked, keeping it managed, making sure, whatever is needed is in place. And so yeah, we hired somebody locally.
I know short-term management can be pretty expensive. How much did that cost you?
That was 18%.
Okay. All right, that's not too bad. Um
No.
all right, so I mean but that is an expense, but so factoring in all those expenses plus utilities and repairs and whatever else, it sounds like everything worked out pretty good and you got a free place to visit. How often did you get down there?
So the goal for us was to have something that we could use accumulatively 3 months out of the year, and then have it available as a rental for 9 months of the year. I think it ended up working out where we spent about 2.5 months a year at the property.
Not bad. And so is this the most recent one that you've done?
No.
Okay, so do you have a property going on pretty much all the time?
We used to, yes. Right now, we don't have one that we use as a rental. We actually have one that we bought, and this is another warning as to why you don't why we personally don't do 1031s, is we bought the property with the intent to do the exact same thing. But this one is significantly closer to our primary home, and we use it quite a bit. So we
Okay.
decided to just keep it as a true second home and not use it as a rental.
So if somebody wanted to do this, and I think this is a great way to vacation free and make some money at the same time, is there any advice that you would give someone on like what a good kind of property is or a good area to buy in? Is there any tips you would give somebody?
Yes, I think the first thing is to really make sure you're looking in an area that is known as a tourist destination. And I think that that's an important factor in your short-term rental strategy, period. But it's especially important with something like this because if you're in a tourist destination and you have flexibility with your schedule, you can make the majority of your money on those hot tourist times, spring break, Memorial Day weekend, 4th of July, whatever is the big draw for the area you purchase in. So you can make the money there and then you can use it in the off times or what have you. So I think that's an important thing when you're looking at the destination. Another thing is just understanding like we chose places because we wanted to be there and then we backed into the strategy from there. So if that's something that you're looking to do, you do have to do your homework first. We did our homework. We knew what we were getting into in terms of the taxes and insurance as you mentioned. So if you're buying in another state, make sure you know all of those little nuances before you start doing the legwork and finding the property.
I think this is an interesting strategy, and I want to figure out the best way to finance something like this. Let me bring in Chaley Ridge real quick. So, Chaley, I'm wondering, would it be better to finance this as like a second home or as a rental property?
Well, I think ultimately, Dan, it's going to depend on the individual's qualifications. We could look at it both ways because technically it could be considered in underwriting guidelines as either an investment property or a second home. Here are the quick differences. If we do this as a second home, under normal market conditions, you're going to have better leverage and sometimes better interest rates. 90% loan to value on second home is what's traditionally available. However, in our current rate environment, which is higher than that it has been, the 90% is available. However, the points that you will have to pay to the rate just to get in the door could make that counterintuitive. So just make sure you're checking on that. The other thing about doing it as a second home, remember, you guys, if your debt to income ratio is really strong, AKA low, it should be fine. But if you do this as a second home, you will have no rental income to help offset that payment. So DTI is going to have to absorb this full PITI versus doing it as an investment. Yes, you're putting 20% down, but you'll have rents, assumptive rents, to offset potentially the new mortgage payment and keeping the DTI in check.
All right. So, what about rate wise? Is there a difference in rate between the second home and the rental property?
I would say normally, yes. You're normally going to see a second home have a better interest rate. However, over the last couple of years, the FHFA has deemed that the LLPA's loan level price adjustments for second home and investments have taken a hit. So based on the variables of the transaction itself, which are loan to value, loan size, credit score, property type, et cetera, I do find regularly that the interest rate difference between the two occupancies is really not all that far different. It might be an eighth, maybe it's a quarter, not what we've come to expect between investment and second home. That paradigm has shifted a little bit, at least as it applies to our current market today.
All right. So, bottom line, if you do a rental property loan, you're going to need a 20% down payment, but you're probably going to have lower closing costs. But if you do this as a second home, you're going to be able to put down less, but you're going to have to pay some points.
Correct. I think if I were to give you a better breakdown there, it's probably going to save you about 5%. If you take all the pluses and minuses, a second home, if you can qualify, if your DTI can qualify for that whole payment, you don't need the rental income to offset, you're probably saving about 5% in leverage on a second home versus an investment property.
Okay. So it's really going to depend on the person's situation, how much money they have to put down, what their DTI is. There's not really like a set answer that's the best way to go for everybody.
Beautifully said, Mr. Lane.
If anybody has any follow-up financing questions and you want to reach out to Chaley Ridge, you can track her down at ridgelendinggroup.com. And if anybody wants to reach out to Jacki Tate, I've got her contact information on the website. Jacki is also a realtor in the Flagstaff, Arizona area. And she said there's actually a lot of properties around there that would be great Airbnb properties. If you want to talk to Jacki more about that, you can track her down. I've got her contact information at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 468. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. I'll be back with a new episode next Tuesday. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.